All right, folks. I have been saying for quite some time that initiatives that are critically important to black folks are going to be under attack. My whole book, White Fear, How the Browning of America is Making White Folks Lose Their Minds, detail that. And what we have seen over the past several years, we've seen the attack on Black Lives Matter. We've seen the attack on what it means to be woke. We've seen the attack on CRT. Now we're seeing the wholesale attack on DEI. This is a well-funded effort to go after all of these programs. It wasn't just about the affirmative action decision that applied to colleges and universities. It's also the various programs that are happening in corporate America. Affinity groups are going to be under attack. I'm telling y'all, these things are coming. So the question really is, what should the response be? Black folks in corporate America, what should they be doing? African Americans who are board members, what should they be doing? So I had this conversation with my man Bruce Gordon, who's longtime executive at Verizon. When he retired from Verizon, he became president and CEO for the NAACP, lasted there a year. I really think they made a huge mistake, really not leaving him at the helm for longer than that. He joins us right now. So glad to see you, Bruce, to chat about this. First and foremost, how do you, just from your perspective, as someone who has been at the top of the game in corporate America, you sat on boards of directors, you're interfacing. What are you hearing from folks? Are they willing? Do they understand what the attacks are and what we're about to see over the next 6 months, a year, 2 years?
So, Roland, thanks for having me, one. And two, let me just take that word perspective and put a little context, more context on it. Because my perspective is a product of 53 years in the corporate environment. My perspective started in 1968 as a trainee. It ended in the C-suite in 2003, so that's a while ago. But I was running a $24 billion business. And then it finally ended in boardrooms, and I served on 8 corporate boards. So I've had a range of experience and a lot of perspective over the years. In terms of DE&I today, when I started, it was affirmative action. And it has morphed to DEI over that period of time. And as it's morphed, I think that the consistency that has existed in our community is that we should be pushing affirmative action and its predecessor DEI or its successor DEI because it's good for black folks. We need it for our community. I don't debate that. But I think the more relevant discussion is corporations need us. DEI is not something that just serves our interest. It serves the bottom line of corporations and their interest. And as we think about this and as we address this movement in the country, in certain states that are trying to, quote, outlaw DEI, we should understand, and corporations need to understand, that this doesn't just hurt our community, it hurts their bottom line. And they need to take it as seriously as they take other policy issues, like, for instance, tax policy. So just understand that that's a perspective that I have, and it's a belief that I have that we, as the black workforce, labor market, talent pool, however you want to characterize it, we're good, we're talented, we're capable, and we don't just need corporations to hire us. Corporations need us to be better. Let me just start by saying that. What do I hear?
Well, on that,
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is that, some people might say, who's this old guy you have on here, Roland? Bruce Gordon started in '68, he's 78 years old. How current is he? Does he have a perspective that is relevant today? I think so, but let your viewers be the judge of that. Because I'm not in the boardroom anymore. Been gone for three years. But here's what I think. I think that corporations created a policy on their own in 2019 about what corporations should do. So it's not just my opinion of what corporations should be doing, it's what corporations have said they should be doing. And they released a statement with a lot of fanfare back in 2019, and they basically said that it is the purpose of a corporation to promote an economy that serves all Americans. The head of the BRT, the Business Roundtable, said the American dream is alive but fraying. These modern principles that they were announcing reflect the business community's unwavering commitment to continue to push for an economy that serves all people. So if corporations believe that, and they've said it proactively, not reactively, then they need to put some muscle and some action behind these words and make sure that those who would take away DEI and affirmative action don't win that fight.
And speaking of that, the lawsuit against the Fearless Fund, Ed Bloom's group, he led the affirmative action case the Supreme Court decided. I know for a fact that several companies have begun pulling their money from them. I got to set up another meeting with them to talk about that, because I said to them, black folks to know who those companies are, because I dare say that in this battle is the wrong time for companies to be pulling out. Those companies, if they believed in the Fearless Fund before the lawsuit, should be standing with them and not withdrawing their money, because those same companies, they want black folks buying their products. And I dare say this is a moment of drawing in the sand. This is where white corporate leaders are going to have to make a clear decision. Are you a real ally, and are you going to look other white folks in the eye who want to stop these programs and say, no, you're wrong, and we are going to continue these type of programs? That's really the moment that we are in.
So the word that I like to use is commitment. Words are one thing, commitment's another. We have seen corporate leaders, we have seen corporations who identify what they believe to be policies that are not in their best interest. We have seen those corporations go to the mat. They spend billions of dollars with lobbying teams, with Washington offices, with offices in state capitals, where they are constantly badgering state and local and federal officials to implement policies that they believe to be in their best interest. If they have volunteered to say that they believe diversity is a source of competitive advantage, and they've said that, if they volunteered to say that they are in business to serve all communities, and they've said that, then they need to put the same energy behind tax policy as they do behind the whole issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion. That said, sometimes it takes a while for policies to shift. We know that the political process does not always move as quickly as it should. While corporations were waiting for tax policy to go their way, they were also finding ways around it. They had an effective and have an effective tax rate versus an actual tax rate versus a legislated tax rate. They found ways around it. They have tax accountants, they have tax attorneys, and they learn to manage their way through restrictions that are not in their best interest. They need to apply that same degree of commitment and energy towards addressing this issue of diversity in America. I think some of them have the stomach for that. Others may not. And I think where you were headed was, what's the role and responsibility of black folks who are in the C-suite, who are in the boardrooms? What's their role in all of this? But you tell me, should we go there?
Because that is the thing for me. I've directly said to Michael Hyder, who heads the ELC, Mike, we need you leading. We need the Black Economic Alliance. We need the Black Economic Forum I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. I'm sorry. I am not seeing civil rights groups being effective on this. This is where our black corporate groups, folks that deal with economics, the U.S. Black Chamber Inc., this is where they have to step up, lead the effort, and then also calling in those white women, calling in Latinos, saying, "Hey, this ain't just about us. Y'all gonna be affected as well." And so this is where there has to be, to me, a forceful pushback and a defense and going on the offense in what we're seeing, as opposed to, hey, let's fall back, stay quiet, and see how it shakes out. It's clear what is coming our way, and it is a train, and they're going to go after every single program. We already see it for law school students. They're going to go after they're going after a scholarship named after George Floyd. This thing is going to go after every single initiative up and down that has impacted African Americans and others, and we better understand what they're trying to do, and it's clear, and they are not being shy about it.
So I chose a career in corporate America because I believed at the time that the civil rights movement was going to move to a different venue, and that was the venue of work, and believed at the time that getting inside that game, accumulating power and influence that would affect policy, that would in fact ultimately benefit our community, was something worth trying to do. I believed that when I started, and I believed that throughout my career. Let's talk a little bit about engagement and who needs to be engaged and how, because I sort of describe it as a 360-degree effort. Clearly, what happens in the boardroom is very impactful in terms of what companies choose to do in matters of policy. In this case, we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and Black economic growth and development. So the boardroom matters. The C-suite matters. And the workforce matters, because you just referred to affinity groups. Affinity groups, if functioning the way they were initially intended, and I consider myself to be a founder of that whole affinity group concept, all of those parties need to be engaged. And the difference between life in corporate America in '68 versus 2024 is that we have presence. We have Black CEOs. We have Black C-suite members. We have Black board members. And the workforce looks a lot better in terms of our representation today than it did then. So we might argue that we don't have all the power we want, but we have one hell of a lot of power, and it's time to step up and use it. Don't say you want to be in a boardroom if once you find your way in there, you are going along to get along. Take a strong position. Don't say that you want to be in the C-suite if once you get there, you collect a paycheck, but you forget whose shoulders you stood on to arrive there in the first place. And something that everybody at every level needs to understand in the corporate America hierarchy, and some might think I'm crazy when I say this, but you got to be willing to get fired. You got to be willing to get kicked out. If you believe in a position that best interest of our people, then you got to be willing to get fired. I know, Roland, I mean, this is fact. I know that there were 2 times when there was a concerted effort in my company to fire me. I know that. I saw the documentation. I had the discussions. But I also felt, given my initial attitude about joining corporate America, that if I was going to do what I said I was going to do, I had to take that risk. I think that one of the downsides of the success economically that a significant segment of our community has had in terms of finding employment in large corporations, climbing the ladder, finding their way into the C-suite, managing to be in boardrooms, collecting board fees, is there's a tendency to get a little comfortable. There's a tendency to go along and get along. There's a tendency not to want to make people uncomfortable. In my opinion, that's the reason we're there. That's our
yes.
So there is, and I don't want to sound the least bit judgmental, because I know plenty of folks who are doing just that. Maybe not as many as I'd like. Maybe there's not 100% participation, but there are plenty of folks who understand who they are, where they are, and what their roles and responsibilities are. And to your point, we need those folks now more than ever.
The reason I started laughing because I've often said, I started every job with the premise I was going to get fired anyway. I said, listen, three things can happen. Either you leave on your own volition for another job, you stay there until you're retired, or you get fired. And I've always said, look, I'm going to say what I need to say while I'm there. I always say I couldn't stand parking lot militants. And that's the black folks who got a whole lot to say when you're in the parking lot. But then when you go in the building, they ain't got nothing to say. And then you look around and like, well, what the hell? I'm the only one talking. You were talking all that smack in the parking lot. Don't be a parking lot militant. And the thing about when we talk about not just the C-suite folks, but also board members. And I've had this conversation with John Rogers and others as well. And I'm sitting there going, black folks fought like hell to get black board members. John H. Johnson and Earl Graves and Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. and so many others. And I've said to black board members, if black folks are not getting more contracts, professional services, outside law firms, outside accounting firms, you got black catering companies, black-owned media, black PR companies, we can go on and on and on. I'm like, if you have not had a material impact on increasing business to black people, then what are you doing? And it's not just you there to collect stock options and you feel good and you get to send your kids to private school and you only benefit. And that to me is, I think black board members today must have that reminder of, while you're there, what changed while you were there? And it's not just a question of, well, I really can't do much. I said, no, you can do a lot more if you want to. And I think we have to be constantly challenging one another to say, we must be doing more beyond, not, as Dr. King said, not as individuals, but operating in the collective.
So you and I both know John well enough to know that John gets it, and that John and his colleagues have, for, I don't know, maybe 15, 18 years now, gathered black directors in an annual conference for the purpose of making sure that they accept their roles and responsibilities as advocates for black economic growth and development in this country. So there clearly are those who get it. Let me tell you a quick story, if I can, that sort of represents the model that I think works best, because I still think it takes us all. So, as you know, John and Melody have years been fighting, in some respects, just to get a percentage point of the capital that is deployed through pension funds and other corporate capital allocation decision making. And while there's been some progress, it's really not been enough. We had that problem at Verizon. We were not spending what we should have. We were not allocating as we should have to funds like Ariel. Well, in the boardroom was Hugh Price, who was the former head of the Urban League. In the C-suite was Bruce Gordon. And in a very key role that I'll come to in a minute was another brother. So Hugh was asking the question in the boardroom, what are we doing with our pension fund management? Asking the CEO and his fellow board members. So he raised the issue and put a spotlight on it and pushed for results. While he was doing his thing in the boardroom, and appropriately so, I became a gateway, because I was not in the CFO's organization. I was running a business. But people got to know who I was and that I was in the C-suite. So they came to me and they said, we're having a difficult time trying to get access to Verizon's pension fund. Can you help us? So I would take those persons. I didn't take them all, because I too tried to screen to make sure we were getting the best and the brightest. And when I saw a really talented person, then I went to our CFO, who was a white guy, but an ally, and said, I need you to have this company considered for allocation. The secret in that whole equation was the screener who made the decisions, the person who interviewed these firms and made the recommendation as to whether or not they were worthy or not was a brother. His name was Conrad Francis. So ultimately, from Hugh to Bruce to Conrad, with help from Fred, CFO, and Bill, the pension fund executive, we went from effectively zero to $1 billion. And we did that in probably 2.5 years. But it took the whole alignment. What couldn't just be Hugh in the boardroom, couldn't just be Bruce in the C-suite, couldn't just be Conrad who was in middle management. It took all of us. And it took a little bit of Jesse Jackson at the Wall Street Initiative raising that same topic in a different community, but the same relevant audience. That's how things get done. And I think we sometimes spend too much time pointing a finger at one player in that game and saying, why aren't you doing your job? Instead of recognizing that it's got to be a collaborative. And then to your point, Roland, when you look at the civil rights groups, you have to ask the question, are they too raising these issues? Are they too putting the kind of advocacy pressure that they are able to put on the equation? It takes us all, and we need to collaborate and get it done.
Absolutely. Hold tight 1 second. I got to go into a quick break. We come back. My panel has questions. We're chatting with Bruce Gordon. Folks, I'm sounding this alarm because I need everybody who is listening to understand what is at stake. This is not Boy Who Cried Wolf. I'm telling you, what is happening right now, and I've had this conversation with numerous people, we're talking about millions and billions of dollars that are at stake. We're talking about support for HBCUs and other initiatives. I'm telling y'all, this thing is real, and the attacks are going to continue. We must be prepared for it. We're chatting with Bruce Gordon, retired Verizon executive. He sat on a number of corporate boards, also was a CEO of the NAACP. Let's go to my panel. Greg Carr, you're up first.
Thank you, Roland, and thank you, Brother Gordon, for a very enlightening and important conversation. As you probably know, the law school at Howard was renamed recently for Vernon Jordan, who, of course, has a very complicated legacy. And so I appreciate you being very thoughtful in dealing with this question of individual achievement as distinct from working together. My question has to do with what you think of, is the long arc of the mission and of what these folks are trying to do. I'm thinking about it because of the deep pockets that are currently trying to shape the contours of American society and beyond. Of course, we know real affirmative action. Jared Kushner with his affinity fund, with all this money coming from outside the United States, clearly they have a global agenda at work. My question really is, how is this effort to suppress non-white folk, including poor whites, in fact, is this sustainable? I'm thinking about the attack on HBCUs in particular, and how now they seem to not just be satisfied with trying to eliminate DEI in white spaces, but trying to restructure black spaces as well by saying that you can't perhaps even consider race in, for example, admissions criteria at places like Howard or Meharry or Morehouse College of Medicine, School of Medicine, medical schools. Is this sustainable, this all-out assault on non-whiteness?
That's a great question, and my answer will or will not disappoint you. I think it is sustainable. I think that the threat is, for our community, an existential threat. I think it's deep-seated. I think it is funded by the wealthy and the white poor. It is a coalition with incredible power and influence. And yes, I think it is sustainable. That doesn't mean that I think we can't come out on top. That doesn't mean that I don't think we can do something to curb and reverse their momentum. But we should view it with enormous concern. I don't think Roland is being hyperbolic at all with how he's described the circumstance. But the question becomes, what's at the root of it? Why? That's complicated, but to say the least. But I think there are two things in play that end up sort of complementing each other. I think for those who have achieved some level of wealth in this country and who believe in their right to pass on their wealth to the generations that follow, it's an economic issue. And they believe that to the extent that they control the economy, they control wealth distribution, they have policies in place that protect them, so to speak, secure them, that that is ultimately an outcome that they desire. So to be fair about this, I don't think all white folks are like that, but there are plenty. So that's one thing. The other thing, and call me crazy, but we on this call, we knew how this country was founded, and we knew who was in charge and who was in the fields. And there's a certain segment, a large segment, unfortunately, of our fellow Americans who would just as soon have it go back to that, and believe that was the right way to run this country. So racism is alive and well in America, and we should never doubt it. The battle for wealth and the retention of wealth and the distribution of wealth is also alive and well. And I think it's those two things that sort of collaboratively create the momentum that puts this at risk. So yes, I think to the extent that these two forces continue to collaborate, it's a sustainable movement, and we should be worried about it. Not undefeatable, but certainly sustainable. Is that fair?
That's more than fair. Thank you, Brother Gordon. Thank you.
Reese.
Mr. Gordon, thank you for being here with us. My question is, how do we get people who I think to some degree rightfully view the DEI programs and the whole umbrella of DEI as merely cosmetic changes that haven't moved the needle much in terms of Black progress and has done more for white women than it has for Black people? How do we get those folks to see that this attack on DEI is not necessarily just about eliminating programs that people may or may not feel are effective for different reasons, but really is about turning back the clock on racial progress, and that we need to have a sense of urgency around this movement, as you put it, as opposed to just being a little apathetic about particular individual programs going away.
And your question, if I make sure I understand, is how do we in our community?
Yeah, how do we get our community to kind of get off the sidelines, get our community, people that don't perceive DEI programs as really having moved the needle for us, to see that whether or not they feel like those programs are effective, a larger movement is at play to roll back racial progress?
So, one of the things that I wonder is whether DEI is an acronym. If you did a survey of our community, whether more than half of our community would even recognize it as a term, because think of where it is most frequently talked about in higher education and in corporate America, and the majority of our community don't find themselves in either of those places. So it's one concern I have is in terms of raising the awareness, it may not be a kitchen table topic that gets their attention. They're more concerned, those of us less fortunate than us, those assembled on this call, they're more concerned about feeding their families today. They're more concerned about getting their kids educated. There are more fundamental issues, more survival-like issues that I think have their attention. So that's not to say that we shouldn't be educating those who don't get it, but I think we need to segment our community of Black folks, and really ask the question: what are the issues that are most important to each segment? Because we're not an homogenous group, and I'm not sure, not satisfied that we address our broader community in the sophisticated, segmented way that we need to. Uh, I'm not sure I'm answering your question well, but I
No, that
just
was actually perfect. I wholeheartedly agree with you. Thank you.
okay.
Law Victoria Burke.
Hey, Ms. Gordon, nice talking to you. With everything that we're seeing right now, can you name anyone who's doing it right? Maybe 2 or 3 companies that are actually doing well with DEI that you're saying to yourself, wow, they're standouts at a time when we're getting all this pushback?
I once again, I'm sort of 3 years removed, so I may not be as current as I should be. Let me say 2 things. One, I do worry that as a general trend, people in my generation, so people who left corporate America in the last 10, 15 years, were beginning to worry that the pipeline of Black talent coming behind us to succeed us, we were concerned that there wasn't enough there, not because there weren't qualified people, but because those pipelines weren't being cultivated as aggressively as they needed to be. That said, on a positive note, if you look at representation in boardrooms and C-suite, we're doing somewhat better. So who has been doing it well? I will tell you that that Verizon has had a good track record. If you look at the diversity on the Verizon board, it's as diverse a board as any that you'll see anywhere in the country. If you look at their senior team and look at recent appointments, it's moving in the right direction. Their lead independent director is an African American. So I'm sure I'm biased, and I'll acknowledge that. But Verizon has a pretty good track record. I served on the board of Northrop Grumman. That company, when I arrived there, in my opinion, was not as progressive as it needed to be. The CEO who stepped in shortly after my arrival made an absolute and total commitment to diversity. He built it into the compensation of a senior executive team. He established very specific, measurable outcomes that would affect the bonuses of his senior executives based upon whether they were achieved or not. And a significant amount of progress was made, at least during my tenure on that board. So I do see companies that are making progress. I do see companies that are doing the right things. And if you ask me, so what are they? Because I think that's the more what are the elements that make a DEI initiative work, program work? It's one, it's talked about in the boardroom. It's a board agenda topic, and it is talked about consistently. One. Two, senior executives have their pay affected by their ability to achieve the goals that are set by the company in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And by the way, I should have preceded that by saying there are specific, measurable goals set on diversity, equity, and inclusion. One element that has crept into this discussion around diversity that sort of clouds the issue is the term people of color. Because often you'll see reports and analysis and it'll talk about people of color. And they're all lumped into one category, which is an easy way to present, interpret the numbers to suggest how well an organization is doing. And some companies were starting to understand that and starting to disaggregate people of color so that you could be very specific about progress made with black, brown, and yellow people. So those are some of the techniques that I think matter. At the end of the day, pay for performance is a big factor in getting companies and leaders of companies to take diversity, equity, and inclusion seriously. I hope that's helpful.
Well,
Thank you.
And
one of the things that I've made. Go ahead, Bruce. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, what I'm about to say, I'm saying it too late. But you guys make me feel like an old man when you say Mr. Gordon. So Bruce is good with me. Go ahead, Roland.
Well, trust me, when people call me Mr., I say this. I say, listen, I'm Roland. My daddy is Mr. Martin
I'm with
because
you.
he's 77 this month. I'm 55, so I understand. I understand your point. Here's the thing in final comment, because one of the things that I have been doing is, and you know, we're still trying to get the Black Economic Alliance on the show. I made it clear to Michael Heido, look, EOC, want you on the show, and the rest of these people, because I know what I'm seeing. I know what I'm hearing, and I understand the landscape, because I also understand history. And the reality is, in American history, anytime there's a period of black success, it's been followed by white backlash. And those 8 years of Obama pissed off a lot of people. I knew what the heck was coming. The lawsuits are in front of us. These things are there. And so what I'm saying to folks is understand what we're going up against is a well-funded, well-organized effort because they recognize that the demographics of this country are changing. And what we cannot afford is to be complacent, is to be comfortable. I look at all of these companies that announce these billions of dollars in commitments post George Floyd, and I have said to the Urban League, the NAACP, and Reverend Al Sharpton's NAN to Rainbow Push, now under Freddie Haynes, that we should be calling those people to the carpet by saying, if you promised $100 billion, then you should be spending the $100 billion. We should be challenging them on black-owned advertising, challenging them in every place, because again, a lot of these companies, they want our money. They want us buying their products, but there's a return on investment when it comes to that. And that, to me, Dr. King said that in his final sermon on April 3rd, 1968, when he said that we're fighting for sanitation workers and we must redistribute the pain. He said those who do not do business with black people, we do not do business with them. And that, to me, is how we also get their attention, because the last thing they'd want is for us to, as King said on April 3rd, is to withdraw our money. And that, to me, is the most powerful weapon that we have. Bruce, final comments.
I want to really close out with some comments, Roland, about the organizations, because you've said it a couple times, and I understand. And there's no question that these are organizations that are in a position to make a difference. So the ELC, I've said this to leaders of the ELC. I've been a member of the ELC, but I have, for a long time, believed that ELC punches below its weight. And I think by having black C-suite membership and having the kind of numbers and the kind of access that ELC has to the corporations that are represented in its membership body, I do believe that ELC is punching below its weight. And while it's done some very positive things, it could be far more impactful than it has been. And since I have been a member of ELC, so that I'm not casting dispersions, I could have done a better job too, and I'm not happy with where things are today. Black Economic Alliance, you and I have talked about BEA. It's a relatively young organization. As you know, I'm one of the founding board members, advisory board member today. Frankly, the organization in a short period, because it was only founded in 2017, has gotten a lot accomplished. And in terms of its mission of having a voice in policymaking, particularly at the presidential level, much of the Joe Biden platform in 2020 was influenced significantly by input from the Black Economic Alliance. So I still am optimistic that it will continue to grow, continue to develop, and continue to be impactful, and probably needs to do an even better job of making folks aware of who they are. And then the third organization
Absolutely.
that doesn't get talked about nearly as much as I wanted to be talked about is the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. In my opinion, it is the single most important civil rights organization in our country. And the work that they do in the judicial system at the federal, state, and local level is unparalleled. It too needs support. It needs funding. A good amount of the post-George Floyd murder commitments actually went to LDF. I know that I was helpful in making some of that happen. And I just want to make sure that as we as a community look at our organizations, we should critique those who are underperforming. We should encourage those who are trying to become good performers, and we should cheer for the ones who are delivering day in and day out. And the Legal Defense Fund is delivering for our community, and we all need to get behind it and support it.
Well, I'll tell you, look, we call them often to get Janae Nelson on this show. We've had some of the other lawyers that have been involved in their cases on the show. We also are constantly, when Christian Clark led the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, and also now Damon Hewitt. And I'm often saying that our legal groups have played a huge role. And so I absolutely believe in elevating them. And the reason, you know, when I'm calling all of these folks and I'm saying, look, we want you to come on because I always say it, don't just talk to CNN or talk to MSNBC. Our people need to realize that these groups exist and the work that they're doing. And because if our people understand this, and when somebody says, well, man, folk not doing nothing, we can then say, wait a minute, hold up. They were just on the show. This is what they're doing. They're doing this, they're doing that. And so I believe it's important that our folks absolutely know that, understand that. And so, you know, and so we're going to continue, which is why I'm constantly, you know, some of these people, I got some folks, they mad out here when I'm pressing them on the advertising front, but I'm clear that if we're not getting our fair share of dollars, we can't build Black-owned media to be what it needs to be able to hire more reporters and tell more of these stories. And we've got to have that because if we're waiting on somebody else to cover our story, we're going to be waiting a long time. And so we got to be able to marshal our forces and get them to understand, hey, here's what's coming down the pipeline. Let's get prepared. And so that's really what our objective is.
Well, let me tell you something. I know what you're doing. I know how long you've been doing it. You are committed beyond commitment, and I appreciate you, brother. Just keep up the fight, which, by the way, I know you will, regardless of whether I encourage you to do it or not, because that's just Roland Martin. But
So I ran into I saw Chris Williams. He's here at Augusta National. He's a member, and I ran to Fred Terrell. I was joking with Fred, and Fred said. He said, man, somebody told me they would try to get you to pipe down. I said, Fred, if it's one thing that's guaranteed, I ain't going to never pipe down. I said, somebody has to say the stuff that other folk don't want to say. I said, and that's going to be me. So, and he just busted out laughing at that. Bruce, I appreciate it, man. Thank you so very much.
My pleasure, Roland. Be well.
Fanbase is pioneering a new era of social media for the creator economy. This next generation social media app with over 600,000 users is raising $17 million, and now is your chance to invest. For details on how to invest, visit startengine.com/fanbase or scan the QR code. Another way we're giving you the freedom to be you without limits.